Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I am going to share why you should play 7th edition Call of Cthulhu from Chaosium Inc. And I'll begin to provide my thoughts about the game right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me for this month's edition of Why You Should Play. And today I'll be discussing why you should play 7th edition Call of Cthulhu from Chaosium Inc. It's written by Sandy Peterson, Mike Mason, Paul Fricker, Lynn Willis, and friends. Let's not forget those friends. Now, there is a slipcase set, which you're taking a look at right now, which contains everything you'll ever need to run and play Call of Cthulhu. And it includes the Investigator Handbook, the Keeper Rulebook, and the Keeper Screen. Now, this carries an MSRP of $129.95. You can get the two core rule books individually if you would like. So the Investigator Handbook carries an MSRP of $44.95, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at Drive-Thru RPG for $22.95. The Keeper Rulebook carries an MSRP of $54.95, or you can grab just the PDF for $27.95. It's important to note, if you order the physical books from Chaosium Inc., or if you get them from an affiliated brick and mortar store, you will get the PDFs absolutely free. Now, if you're kind of up in the air about Call of Cthulhu and you're not sure if you want to make that kind of investment to check out the game, there is a fantastic starter set that Chaosium Inc. has put together for Call of Cthulhu. It will introduce you to the system. It includes 3 adventures as well as a solitaire adventure, which allows you to get a grasp of the game's mechanics. And I highly recommend that as well. Now, I've reviewed all of these. So if you want a bit of a deeper dive into each, then you can, of course, swing on over to thegaminggang.com. All of that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because I'm going to discuss why you should play 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. A few things I want to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, I have been running Call of Cthulhu since the summer of 1981. It was a summer between my freshman and sophomore years in high school, and I have never looked back. And I have run more hours of Call of Cthulhu than I have any other role-playing game over the decades combined. So it's probably important that you know that I have a real love affair with Call of Cthulhu before we jump on in. Also, I'm going to be discussing the game, and as I discuss the game, I'm going to flip through both the Investigator Handbook and the Keeper Rulebook. Now, I'll probably be talking about things that have absolutely nothing to do with what you're looking at, but I do want to share that just the fantastic presentation that you're going to find with the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu. Plus, it gives you something to look at as I just ramble on. So if you're not familiar with Call of Cthulhu, it is a role-playing game which is based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. So this is a game of mystery and investigation and cosmic horror. Now, I will mention H.P. Lovecraft as a person is problematic. Now, for the period of time he lived, and he passed away in 1936, he was pretty prejudiced and bigoted. Now, I know a lot of people gloss over the fact that his worldview was not all that radically different than a lot of other white Americans out there at the time, but still, that doesn't make it acceptable. So you want to keep in mind, just because you play or run Call of Cthulhu does not mean that you believe in H.P. Lovecraft's worldview in any way, shape, or form. It's a sandbox he created and other authors built upon. So, one of the big selling points, in my opinion, for Call of Cthulhu, any edition of Call of Cthulhu, is just how easy it is for newcomers to grasp the mechanics of the game. And when I say newcomers, I don't just mean newcomers to Call of Cthulhu, I mean newcomers to role-playing games in general. Because you see, everything is percentile based. So you have percentile dice. They are 10-sided dice, and normally you'll have two different colored dice. Some dice are now made where they have the tens, so it'll say 20 or 30 or 70 on it. And then you have another die, which is the single digits. Regardless if you're using two different colored dice or you're using one that already has the tens on it, you roll the dice, it's going to provide you with a number between 1 and 100, and you're going to compare that to your attribute that you might be rolling against or a skill that you have that you're looking to utilize. And for the most part, that is your core mechanic as a player. Now, of course, there are rules out there that are going to make it more difficult and lower your skill or attribute because it's something harder that you're trying to do or extremely hard that you're trying to do. We also have advantage. We've got disadvantage, which will allow you to roll an extra tens die. If you have advantage, you're going to take the lowest number. If you have disadvantage, you're going to take the highest number because rolling low is good as far as the percentile dice. Rolling high when you're rolling for damage is what you're aiming for, but for the most part, you're always hoping to roll low with your percentile dice. We also have luck, which you can spend points of luck to lower your roll to turn it from a failure to a success. And we also will have what's known as pushing the roll. So in a situation where you failed your roll, you discuss it with the keeper of arcane knowledge, just the keeper, who's the game master here, and they may allow you to push the roll, which means you get to roll again, knowing that if you fail again, not only will you fail, but something bad on top of that will take place. So this mitigates some of the difficulty that was kind of inherent in earlier editions of Call of Cthulhu, because there are situations where maybe you were trying to find a clue and you failed your roll. Well, that means you didn't find the clue, and maybe that clue was extremely important into figuring out what the hell was going on. So that is something that you want to keep in mind. So rather than having a range of 3 to 18 as far as your attributes, and we have the fairly standard role-playing game attributes like constitution and strength, dexterity. We have some newer ones, different ones too. But instead of having that range of 3 to 18, which would normally, in most role-playing games, just provide you with a die modifier, in this case, that is your percentile chance. So if you have an intelligence of 70, that means when you're rolling to check against your intelligence, you're looking to roll 70 or less. The percentile chance of success is so easily understandable by people, as opposed to, oh, okay, so you're going to roll a 20-sided die, you're going to add 1 for this, add 2 for this, you're going to subtract 1 for this. Doesn't necessarily give players a good feel for how are my chances of being successful at this. So we have our attributes, we also have our skills. So as I mentioned before, the players are going to take on the roles of investigators because this is a mystery and investigation game. So you're going to have just regular people. Now they could run a wide gamut of occupations. You could have someone who's an auto mechanic, or You could have someone who's an Indiana Jones type archaeologist, or maybe a member of the clergy or a hobo. All of these are possible, and we have a variety of different skills. Off the top of my head, I think there's about 75 that are contained in the core books. And you can, of course, create new skills to kind of drill further down. You can create skills to make things a little more all encompassing. It's pretty wide open as far as that goes. Now, the default setting for Call of Cthulhu is 1920s. So many of the skills in these core books are kind of geared toward that era. Now, of course, you can play Call of Cthulhu in any historical era, and there is tons and tons of content out there for a variety of different eras in history, all the way back to ancient Rome. And there's also setting books out there for the future. Now, many of these are from past editions of Call of Cthulhu, or they're from third-party publishers, but still, you'd be just blown away by how much content there is out there for Call of Cthulhu, and I will talk about that in a little more depth in a few moments. So we've got our investigator, and what will normally take place is that they find themselves in situations where they are going to learn more about the Cthulhu mythos, these alien beings who at one time actually ruled the earth. And they were around until humans actually evolved. And there are stories from H.P. Lovecraft where people learn the true origin of the human species and our place in the cosmos, and how we're actually sharing our planet with these other beings. And of course, this is all things that just the average person doesn't know about. So it's, of course, things that man was not meant to know. And as the player characters learn about these things, their sanity is shaken because their core belief system is actually being destroyed as they learn more about like our true place in the universe, or that these deep ones live under the sea and that humans have bred with deep ones. All of this stuff is out there in a variety of different adventures. So I really love the fact that you can use Call of Cthulhu in a variety of different ways. You can run it as a cosmic horror role-playing game as intended, but you can also take one-shot adventures and play those with characters. And then you can use those same characters to play a big months, if not years long campaign with all these adventures that are all tying together, telling a big story. And then you can have games which only take maybe 3 or 4 sessions to complete, maybe even less than that. They all work equally well. So you can have adventures which feature the Cthulhu mythos, and then you have adventures that are just maybe folkloric, and then turn around and have an adventure which features absolutely nothing horrifying or unnatural, and it's all about gangsters and bootleggers in Chicago. You can easily pull all of that off. Now, another aspect of Call of Cthulhu that I feel is exceptionally well done is how entrenched in real history the game is. And in this Investigator Handbook, you're going to find loads and loads of reference information about the 1920s. Now, as you can see here, there is content for the modern day as well, which wasn't always the case with the core editions of Call of Cthulhu. In the past, they only focused on the 1920s. Now we actually have both the 1920s, which is the default, as I mentioned, as well as the modern day. So let's take a look here at the Keeper Rulebook. Now, between the two books, there is some redundancy, I should point out. And I know some people, when they were first picking up these books when they came out, they were really surprised. Well, for one, they were surprised that the story Call of Cthulhu isn't included in these books. It's actually the Dunwich Horror. And it was the first time in any edition that Call of Cthulhu was not included as the story to kind of give you a feel for the mythos and the setting. And one of the reasons why that the Dunwich Horror is included is because it's actually much like a Call of Cthulhu adventure. It plays out like a Call of Cthulhu adventure, where the Call of Cthulhu story doesn't. So you're going to have that. Now, the Keeper Rulebook is going to focus more on actually running the game, gets far deeper into the mechanics of the game, as well as magic and sanity and insanity. And we have a bestiary of various different Cthulhu monsters. Now, Call of Cthulhu is a vastly different kind of role-playing game than anything else that's out there that isn't specifically a mystery game. Because most games, it's dungeon delving or going off on missions. Here, the players are trying to unravel a mystery. They're trying to piece things together to understand what exactly is going on in the situation they may have been thrown into. Being just regular folk, they are far squishier than they would be in a game like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or even Traveler. Now, there are pulp rules. There is a pulp supplement that is available you can pick up, which kind of makes Call of Cthulhu a bit more of a two-fisted action role-playing game, where it also will have various rules for like psychic abilities and things like that. Myself personally, I have always run kind of a pulp vibe. Now, I've never included like super abilities or anything like that. There are no Doc Savages or the Shadow in my Call of Cthulhu adventures and campaigns, but I do tend to skew a little bit towards two-fisted action, and I try to have my player characters' survivability bumped up a bit. So as I mentioned, the game system itself is very, very easy to wrap your head around. Now, I will point out that, at least in my opinion, probably my least favorite aspect of the core rule system for Call of Cthulhu is combat. I tend to run my combat a little more theater of the mind, a little more abstract than the rules themselves here. But they do go into a good amount of detail. So if you are looking for a bit of a crunchier combat, it's certainly available here for you. Now, something else that's a big deal in Call of Cthulhu are chases. And we're not only talking about the player characters chasing down suspects or monsters or anything like that. More times than not, it's actually the players running away, their characters running away from cultists and monsters and so forth. So we have some detailed rules about chases, which are very, very well done. In fact, it was one of the new things for 7th edition, one of the major new additions to 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. Now, something that a lot of people have questions about is the sanity and insanity system. And the reason why it is included here is because sanity plays such a huge role in the Lovecraft stories, because his protagonists and or narrators usually will end up at the end of a story in an insane asylum, because their minds have been shattered by what they've encountered, what they've learned, what they've experienced. It is very respectfully presented, and I'll be the first to point out, if you want to downplay sanity in your Call of Cthulhu role playing, you certainly can. You can easily do that. I don't, because I tend to utilize the sanity rules as presented. But of course, I know a lot of people out there very concerned about how mental health is presented. And in this edition, it is very respectfully presented. We've got magic, and unlike other role-playing games that feature magic, magic's really not necessarily a good thing. It's not really something the investigators want to spend a lot of time learning because it has such a terrible result on the caster. And I mean, it saps your sanity. You might lose points from your attributes because it's eldritch magic. It is not something natural. It is something that, once again, man was not supposed to know. So we also have a lot of great information in this Keeper Rulebook about actually running the game and creating mysteries. As far as content, there are decades of adventures and campaigns out there for Call of Cthulhu. And one aspect of Call of Cthulhu, which I also love, is that it is so easy to convert adventures that were created for prior editions to the current edition of Call of Cthulhu, because in its essence, the core mechanic has not changed. It is still percentile based. So I love the fact that you can go back and you can get a PDF for an adventure from second edition Call of Cthulhu and very easily use it in 7th edition C of C. I know a lot of people refer to it as COC, but we always called it C of C. So for 40 plus years, that's how I've referred to it, is C of C. So you're going to find that you will have years and years and years of actual role-playing time available to you with all the content that has been created, both from Chaosium Inc. as well as third-party publishers, both still around and those that are defunct. Stygian Fox provides and publishes a lot of really excellent modern era Call of Cthulhu adventures. If you can find some of the old Pagan Press, or I'm sorry, it was Pagan Publishing adventures out there, like Mortal Coils, that was a campaign, just fantastic. For my money, dollar for dollar, there is far better adventures, quality-wise, for Call of Cthulhu than for any other role-playing game out there. The level of quality, even from past editions where it was all black and white line art, whereas now you can see it's all full color, lots of artwork. Even those adventures, quality-wise, were excellent. Now, that's not to say that Chaosium Inc. didn't release some clunkers along the way. They did, but they also have possibly the greatest role-playing game campaign ever published, and that is Masks of Nyarlathotep. Yes, that's how I pronounce Nyarlathotep. I know a lot of people pronounce it differently. Just like people say, oh, no, it's not Cthulhu, it's pronounced differently. And I'm like, okay, but almost everybody pronounces it Cthulhu. In fact, H.P. Lovecraft never really gave anyone the exact pronunciation because Cthulhu's name is supposed to be almost unpronounceable with the human voice. So we have a bunch of scenarios as well in the Keeper Rulebook to get you started. So that's a look at both of the books. Let's swing over to the other camera because I am going to share some final thoughts about why you should play 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. I think it is probably pretty obvious I love Call of Cthulhu. Always have. I have been running this for over 4 decades, and I always come back to it. I always come back to it. As much as I try to run adventures and campaigns with other genres, other systems, my players always pull me back into Call of Cthulhu. And I'll give you a great example. My best friend, Elliot Miller, who I have been running Call of Cthulhu for all these 40 plus years with, we don't get an opportunity to game all that much. So I was going to run a campaign for another role-playing game. I'm not going to say what it is. And he was like, oh, I'll try to make it. I don't think I can make it every time you run it and things like that. And then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to run Call of Cthulhu. So, of course, I let him know that I was going to be running Call of Cthulhu instead. And within 2 days, he had already emailed me his character. And he's like, so when are we going to get started? How often are we playing? In my personal opinion, you'd be hard pressed to find a role-playing game that has so much going for it, because you have a lot of different options as far as Call of Cthulhu. You can stick to the default 1920s. You can play modern adventures. You can play a variety of different settings and eras in history. You can go with different styles of adventures. In fact, if you're running a campaign, it's really highly recommended that you don't make every single adventure have to be something related to the Cthulhu mythos or even the occult. You try to shake things up all the time. You've got decades of adventures that are available to you, and many of them that are out of print can be found in PDF still. So you've got that going for you. The latest releases, the releases for 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, have all been absolutely top notch. As I mentioned, the most famous and, in my opinion, probably the best role-playing game campaign, not just horror role-playing campaign, but role-playing game campaign, is Massive Nyarlathotep. And there is a new edition which came out not that long ago. It's been just a few years. And it was expanded upon, and it is designed for 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. It is awesome. It is excellent. Of course, if you want to play it all the way through completion, you got a lot of role playing ahead of you, which is also excellent, because you'll find you get a lot of bang for your buck with Call of Cthulhu. Lastly, I should say, you might be wondering, so Jeff, do you think Call of Cthulhu is a perfect role-playing game? Certainly sounds like it. Well, truth be told, no. Call of Cthulhu is not a perfect role-playing game. I have never encountered a perfect role-playing game. But I will say, Call of Cthulhu is as close to perfection as I have ever seen in a role-playing game. That's why you should play Call of Cthulhu 7th edition from Chaosium Inc. I love it. I can't get enough of it, and I always come back to Call of Cthulhu. It is my absolute favorite role-playing game of all time. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ding that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more that you will not find here on this YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you so much for taking time out to watch this video. And until I see you next time, here's hoping you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, that's okay. You don't have to leave just yet. In fact, why don't you subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel right here, or take a peek at the latest live stream, or even find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks again for watching.